Okay, first off, you're going to need a sheet of just white shelving board you get at the hardware store, and then you're going to need some clay. I like to use uh, right now. I'm using monster clay in the medium hardness, and then you get some sculpting tools. I just use a few sculpting tools. One with a wood one, a couple of brushes that I cut down, and I'm just going to build a little bullet hole here. I'm just going to take little pieces of clay and build up. It's better to build up than to lay a big chunk down and start carving away at it. Just build, take little pieces of clay and build up to the shape that you want. And as I'm doing this, I'm pressing the edges out and starting to blend them down to where they blend off into the surface of the shelving board here. I just use my wood tool with a little bit of Vaseline to smooth that out, to try and get a smooth edge as I can to try and get a good blending edge. And as you can see here, I'm sculpting a bullet hole. I'm gonna I'm gonna use the back side of this rake here to take off a little bit extra, and then that's just part of the sculpting process. Sometimes you got to take some away. I'm gonna use the loop, the wire loop end of the wood tool that I was using to mush down the edges, um, to add some detail. And I'm going to refine it further with a finer rake, which is a tool that's just made with a saw blade. So I'm refining it with the rake just to try and get some of the lumps and bumps out of it, so I get uh, a smoother surface. And I just keep raking along until it looks smooth to me. And then I'll take some of the rake marks out with the stiffer acid brush. Now, some people like to use alcohol at this point. I found with monster clay you don't really need to use alcohol. You can just use a, a stiff brush and kind of model it right out. It's a it's a it's a stiffer clay, and it seems to work well without the alcohol. And then when I got the surface to where I like it, I'm going to start adding the skin texture detail, and I use the 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 wire loop that I have at the end of my wooden tool, and I'm just going to make little dots with with the wire tool, and just work my way around and make a zillion little dots until it looks like skin texture. If I if I if I pull the clay too much, then I'll go back over and smooth it down a little bit, and then I'll go over that and make a few more dots to make it look like skin texture. What you saw before, I was using a graphic arts, like a bead tool that has a little round ball on the end of it. Now I've gone back to the wire loop tool. Here's the little beading tool I was talking about. I can add a few little dots with that, and I take the texture all the way out to the edges. I'm smoothing it out on the board so that I get a so when I get to making an appliance, I've got a good blend. Now it's time to make a mold of it, and I've got to build a wall up around the piece that I just sculpted, and I'm going to use this softer clay here. It's important that whatever clay you use, there's different clay you can use. That you use something that's sulfur free. I just use the softer clay for this because it's faster. So first I make a roll of it in my hands, and then I roll it out on the board until it's about uh, it's about about 3/8 of an inch across, and I use that tool, chop off the end there a little bit, because it's getting too long. And then once it's where I like it, I'm gonna kind of mush it down into a flat shape that I can use to make a wall. I just run my finger along and push it down flat to where I've got about ½ inch, or yeah, just about a ½ inch thick there. And then I run my finger back across to just smooth it out a little bit, and then I take it and I turn it over, and I run my finger across on the back side of it, and now I'm just going to cut just a little, just a hair off of the edge there, so that I have a nice flat edge to work with. I'm using that tool to reiterate the flat edge, because that's going to go flat down on the board. And then I just take that piece of clay now, and I wrap it around the sculpture. I leave about a 1/16 of an inch past the sculpture. I don't want to leave too much room. I bring it in pretty close, and I wrap it to where I've got a nice little wall around it, and then I'm using that loop tool again to cut the clay and attach those two pieces. I just kind of smush them together, and then on the inside I've kind of fill in the space and mush it together. And then I'll start to work the outside edge of the mold. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on each little make a series of little, I don't know what to call them, little dents. You can see there on the closer shot that I'm just pushing that edge down so that I don't get in, because I'm going to pour some mold material in there and I don't want it to leak out. There, and that pretty much completes the wall. And just make sure I've got a nice clean wall, not too much space between the edge of the wall and the piece. I don't want it to come right up to the piece. I just want a little bit of space there. Then I'm going to get a scale that measures up to the nearest gram. Not that sophisticated a scale. Up to the nearest gram is fine. And then I'm using a mold material from the Platsil company called 7315, which you can get at Nigel's. Shout out to Nigel's for Platsil 7315. And this is something that you mix together, 50-50 equal parts, part A and part B. I'm going to start off with the part B and pour some in there and measure it out. I think I'm going to put about, I don't know, I'll put about 25 grams in there. This is kind of a slow boring part, because you got to try and be as careful as you can about getting the right amount in there. The 7315 doesn't come in bottles like this. When I got the 7315, I got a funnel and I poured it into these bottles because it's easier for me to work with out of these bottles than it is in the packaging that it comes from. That's just a little note. I feel like I've got to keep talking during these boring parts. But you just got to. But I'm letting it run just to know that it's okay to pour slow and take your time and just watch the numbers on the scale go to where you want them. And that's where I want them. Now I'm going to try to add an equal amount of the part A. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see it. Part A. So I just mathematically double the number. Like if I put in 25 grams, I'm going to double that, and I'm going to fill it up until it says 50 grams. You got to do a little bit of math here. And I think I might have added too much. So if I add too much, then I just divide in half how much I overdid it and go back and add a little bit more of the Part B until I get a good 50-50 ratio. Sometimes I'm not as good a pour chemist as I need to be, because I kind of rushed it a little bit with the Part A and poured in a little too much. So now I'm going to come back with the Part B and make sure that I've got half and half as much. And I take a tongue depressor, and I'm going to stir this for about a minute, scraping the edges and make sure you get all the stuff on the bottom, and make sure you turn it and scrape the edges as you mix it. And you've got plenty of time here. This has about a 3-hour set time. It takes 3 or 4 hours for it to set up, and you've got a working time of about 20 minutes. So you don't have to rush the stirring part to rush it to get into the mold. So stirring it for a minute or close to that is plenty of time. You have plenty of time to stir it up and to get it into the molds. Now I'm just filling this one bullet hole mold, but I have a couple of other molds back there from some sculptures I did before, just because it's to mix up a batch of just one bullet hole, it would have had to have been about 5 grams or so, and you get a better mix if you mix a little bit larger amount. I don't like to go too much smaller than 25 or 30 grams of each of the A and B, just because it's going to come out more accurate that way. But I have some extra molds lying around that need to be filled, so I don't waste it. Now I'll just set that there. It'll be fine. That'll be fine. Now when I fill this, I want to cover the piece up, and I want to just eyeball. I want it to be about not more than a 1/4 inch past the highest point. I don't want to make a big thick eraser. I want to keep it just a little bit less than a 1/4 of an inch past the highest point. And I got that filled up now. And then I took the rest of it and filled up a couple of other things. And now after you get 3 hours or so to go, I go in and I try and not disturb it, because sometimes I can take it out, and if I don't disturb it too much, I can get another pour. But it looks like I just pulled that out now, and I'm going to have to clean the mold out. I'm going to clean the mold out with a little bit of alcohol, because you can see there's a little bit came off around the edge, so I'm not able to pour a second one in there unless I go back in and resculpt the edge down. But anyway, I just take a Kleenex and a little bit of alcohol and clean that right up. I know this is very exciting to watch the mold clean up. The next step that I want to do is I want to fill the mold. Now there's a couple of things I can do I can fill the mold with, but I want to put a release on there first. So I put in just a very, very thin smear of Vaseline. A lot of people say you don't need to do this, but I like to do it. And then I use the Maekup brand of which you can also get at Nigel's. Shout out to Nigel's of the Release and Seal for it's a release and seal made for another product that he sells called ProBondo. Now you can make these. You can also use Baldies if you want. Just dilute it down with acetone. You can use Baldies. Now you can make your own Bondo out of a little bit of Prosthetics cream and the Bondo stipple and color it with a little Pax. But you can also use another product called ProBondo that comes from England. It's also very nice. The ProBondo is a little expensive and sometimes it's hard to find, so you can make your own with Prosthetics cream and ProBondo, and then add a little bit of Pax. I like the MEL Pax. Shout out to MEL Pax. Yeah, it's a good product. And but I'm going to use the ProBondo. ProBondo has an advantage that that you don't have to use too much adhesive when you do the application. With the regular Bondo, you've got to put down a little bit of fresh prostate on the piece, a little bit of fresh prostate on the skin, and wait for it to dry when you do the application. With the ProBondo, you can just let it dry and press it right onto the skin, which we're going to see later. Now I'm just putting a very, very thin layer of Vaseline in there. Some people say you don't have to do this, but I just like to do it. I think it helps it pop out of the mold a little bit easier, because we're going to do a direct application, which means once the mold material is dry, we'll just press the whole thing up on the subject's skin, and then peel the mold away and leave the prosthetic behind. Okay, now I'm taking the Maekup brand ProBondo release and seal and giving it a nice coat of this clear material. This gives the advantage of the appliance coming out of the mold easier, and it also gives a nice seal to the piece, so that as soon as your piece is applied, it already has a little bit of a sealer on the top of it. So I just make sure this is completely covered and get every little part of it. And even at this point too, before you put your mold material in, you can do a little bit of pre-painting. I'm going to use a little bit of Bluebird alcohol paint. Shout out to Bluebird. You can get the Bluebird palette at Nigel's. I think that's a trauma palette. I'm just going to use a little bit of the yellow and a little bit of the red. I like using the yellow because it looks like little pieces of fat under the skin. So I'll dab some yellow on there, and then I'll dab some red too. And so I can do a little bit of pre-painting on the piece, so that when I do the application, that'll just be one less thing that, I've already got a little bit ahead of the game on. Now I'm mixing the blood color with the yellow and dabbing some of that on there too. Yeah, just with a real fine brush and a little bit of alcohol to activate the paint. I'm going to take a dark color just to add a couple little dark places. I don't want it to go too crazy with the dark color, because then it'll just look like a big black dot. And I'll kind of lose some of its dimension. But just a couple of dark places there. Okay, now I'm just going to set that to the side and make sure that that's good and dry. I'm going to let that sit for about 10 or 15 minutes to make sure all the stuff is dry. Then I'm going to take a piece of paper towel and some alcohol and a metal spatula and make sure that it's real clean. I'm going to keep that paper towel handy so that I can use it to wipe my spatula off with if I need to go back and re-clean it. Now I'm going to take a little dab, and I'm going to squish it in to all the detail areas there, just with little dabs of Bondo, making sure that I don't get any air bubbles in the piece. I'm just squishing them down in there, and then I can lift it up, and the advantage of having the clear mold materials, now I can look at it and see if I'm okay, if I've gotten all the details and not missed any spots. Now I'm going to take a little more, and I'm going to cover the whole piece like I'm just adding a thin layer of frosting to the cake, making sure that I get it all completely covered. And then I've got my handy towel there with the alcohol, and then I'm going to try and do just a nice little straight across troweling. Sometimes I can get this on the first try, and sometimes, well, it looks like I got to go back and trowel a little more. And then and this one I think, yeah, I messed it up even more. I put oopsie there. I put a little gouge in it. I'm going to have to go back in and fill that gouge. So I'm kind of going the long way around the bar. And if I'd have done a perfect swipe the first time, I wouldn't have to be doing all this work. But I'll get there. Yeah, wipe it off clean. Come back, do my swipe. Okay, swipe a little bit more. A little bit more. Okay, now I'm happy. I take a look on the other side, see if I've got a good fill. I don't have any bubbles that I got to go back in and start over. I'm going to take a Q-tip with a little bit of alcohol and clean up any stuff past the edges so that I have a nice, so that everything's all nice and clean. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to do the application right out of the mold. And so I want to take any type of residue off of it now, so I don't have to deal with it later. There you go. Okay, so here's another one. Okay, that's how it looks when it dries. It goes and looks really white when you put it in, but then it dries kind of clear. Except I put a little bit of coloring in there. I colored the ProBondo a little bit. Like I say, you can use those to fill your piece, but I use the English ProBondo so that I can just stick that on now and not have to use any adhesive. I'm gonna do this on my arm because with this virus thing around, I don't have any models, so I'm just gonna do it on myself. But I'm gonna wipe the whole area down first with a little bit of just alcohol is fine. Yep. There I am. And now I just take the piece and turn it, hold it with my 3 fingers like so, and then I can kind of look through and observe and decide how I want that piece to go on and just where I want it to go on. And I'm gonna put it on right there. So I just turn it to where I like it, put the mold on, and now I just press. Give it a good press. So the sticky part. Now I just grab the edge of the mold and lift up real slowly. Make sure that the piece is sticking to the skin and not the mold. And there. And then I'll just take a little alcohol and dab over any edges. That's a pretty fast application. So that's the advantage of having these things right out of the mold. If you have them ready, that application took about 20 seconds. And that's pretty good for saving time. It's a good time saving technique. I think I'm going to put another one right up here just so we can see that again, just to show how much I don't know how much time it takes. How much time do we got here? We got about, I don't know, we've been at it for about 10 seconds now. And now we're at it for about 15 seconds. So less than half a minute. You can if you want to count the alcohol swabbing, it takes a whole minute. Now sometimes you get a little bit of shine around the edges on your appliance piece. Well, I'll come back to that in a second. First, I'm just going to add just a little bit more paint just to finish off the paint job. Because now I can see just how the paint job is. Before I was painting it in reverse, so I can add just a little bit more paint where I think I can make it look a little better. I don't know what I'm doing there. Oh, I'm holding up the Bluebird sealer. That's a Bluebird matte sealer, and I just dipped a Q-tip into that and use that straight and go over the edge. It looks shiny when you first put it on while it's wet, but then as soon as it dries to a nice matte finish and gets rid of any of the the giveaway shine. And while we're here, I'm just going to repeat that process just to show you that we can do other things besides bullet holes. We can do cuts. Here's a quick little cut. Once again, you can see it's a pretty fast application. Press the piece on, follow the same steps. Dab the edges with a little bit of alcohol, and what else am I going to do? Oh, and then the final step, I just dip a little bit of this in and cover any shiny area. And I think everybody's got the idea by now, but I'm still having fun, so I think I'm going to stick a couple more down. There you can see how matte it dries. That's what I was pointing out there, that the shine goes away. Once again, I'm just going to put another little cut right here. And just follow those same steps. Just like I did with the bullet holes, I'm going in and finishing off the paint job. The paint job I did before was the same, a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red, and I think I'm just adding a little bit more red here just to put the red where it naturally would be on a cut. So there, in a very short amount of time, we've got some appliances, down and painted and done. So this has been pretty good for the bullet holes and the fresh cuts. I think I'm going to do one more though. I'm going to add a little bit more of the anti-shine sealer. Another thing about these appliances is that they're very durable, and they don't rub off. They don't rub off easy. They'll last you, once you put them on, they'll last you all day long. And it's good for these open cuts and bullet holes that I've shown you here. But here I'm going to do an old scar. This is going to be very subtle. It's going to be tough to see at the very beginning. It looks like it kind of wants to stick in the mold a little bit. Now, if you're doing this and it sticks in the mold, you can use a little brush with some alcohol to loosen it up on your way out, but I'm just kind of winging it there because I've only got two hands. But anyway, I got it out. I'm going to color this with Ben Nye Bruise Wheel. Shout out to Dana Nye and his Ben Nye makeup company. He's got a good line, and I'm going to use the alcohol to activate this as well because I just want to wash. And I'm just going to take a little bit of alcohol and put it in the maroon color and just make a little wash out of the alcohol and the maroon color from the Ben Nye Bruise Wheel. And I'm going to use that as my scar color. If it comes out too heavy, then I just go and mix in a little bit more alcohol until I have just a subtle wash color. Now as I'm painting it, you can start to see that I've got an old scar there. Like this isn't the first time I've slipped my wrist. It's at least the second time. But I'm sure it'll be the last time. And I'll get the alcohol and do just a little bit of cleanup just to make it like I like it. And I use the Q-tip and the alcohol just to take the paint off of the high points and let it sink into the low points. And that's, I'm going to call that done. And cover the whole thing once again with the matte sealer. So there we've got it. We've got 2 cuts. We've got a couple of bullet holes and an old scar. And these are just a few examples of some of the things that you can do with making your own appliances, making your own molds, and then doing the application, which is instead of having to call up a lab or somebody to make your bullet holes or your scars for you, you can do it all yourself in the makeup trailer. I'm going to add a little bit of blood to these pieces, but I'm taking some fake blood there. I think I'm not sure what it is. I think it's probably David Stoneman's makeup brand of blood, but I'm adding a little bit of hand soap into it right now because most fake blood tends to beat up a little bit on the Bondo appliances. So I'm putting a little bit of diluted blood with a little bit of soap in there, and I'm going to put a little bit on the outside where I want it to run. And even if this is going to be like a freshly cleaned bullet hole, like in an autopsy or something like that, where all the blood would have been cleaned up, adding a little bit of soapy blood to the inside part of it, just a clear little bead, is a nice way to add shine to the center, because adding shine into the wound while the rest of it's being matte, it's okay if the wound part is shiny. That makes it look better when the wound part's shiny. You could do that with some glossy sealer too, but the advantage of doing it with the soapy blood is that if you do want to add blood to the wound on top of it, then you won't be getting the beading effect. The blood will spread and flow nicely. So I put a little bit of soap, coming on the outside of those bullet holes a little bit, so I can just add a couple of drops of blood. Depending on some shows, sometimes somebody gets shot in the head and there's just a couple little drops of blood coming out of the bullet hole. It just depends on how graphic they want to be with the ratings and stuff. And sometimes it's more realistic crime scene amount of blood. I'm just going to use a little bit right here. I'm sure everybody watching this can figure out how to take a bottle of blood and add blood to something, but it looks best if you try and keep the blood so it looks like it's coming out of the wound and you don't just cover the whole thing with blood. And there, now I've got my favorite little old scar there too. So we've got an old scar, a couple of cuts, and whoop, we lost focus. Old scar, a couple of cuts, and a couple of bullet holes, and just add a little blood. I'm starting to come to the end of this video now, and I'm just doing a few little finishing touches. I'm going to be doing another video later that'll be in part 2 that'll show you how to take your molds and make duplicates of them. But for now, this is a good amount of information to get you started in making your own prosthetic molds and your own prosthetics, and so you can do really fast, cool applications. And I think I'm I think I'm getting towards the end of this now. I don't know what else to say. What else am I going to say? We're just going to have a couple more shots of that. Okay, thank you all for taking time out of your day to watch this. And that's the end of that. I'm going to show you one more thing, though. I'm just going to show you how to take this stuff off. I've got some Telesis Super Soft. Well, first of all, what I didn't show you is I wiped all that blood off with a wet paper towel. It's important to use like a wet towel or something to get all the blood off of whatever you're doing first, because you don't want to use this solvent remover on top of the fake blood, because it'll make a well, it won't take the blood off. It'll just make a mess. But what I do here is I just take a soft brush and try and find an edge, and just soak the piece with the Super Solve, and try and kind of scrape the brush under the piece and get the Super Solve off. It's a little bit tough of a D-rig, but like I say, these pieces, they do stay on all day long. It looks like I'm just dragging the piece off, but what I'm doing is I'm pushing a little bit of the Super Solve underneath each time I grab it with my fingers. And that's it. All right. Thanks a lot.